for more than 8 years, some persons 12 years, some persons are just starting on the journey, and that is why we're here. So how do we get into that place where we lead ourselves first before we also lead other people? And that's why we're on this conversation. So what are the objectives of why we're here on the call today? The first is we want to explore the different dimensions of self-leadership. We're going to look at them about 3 to 4. There are a lot more, but we're going to box all of them into 4. The first is awareness, then becomes acceptance, then we get into development, and we talk about deployment. Deployment is like, that's the actual point where you're now providing support for young people through the projects that you're providing or deploying. We'll look at the different components of self and think about strategies or work into practical strategies for developing a deeper awareness of self. Do a deep dive into emotional intelligence, which is not new, I presume, and how we can improve our emotional intelligence as a skill. Talk about time management, and then demonstrate confidence. All of this we will do within the next 30 to 40 minutes, and then we can have a session where we have question and answers, have interactions if possible. All right. So this is exactly why we are on this call today. It promises to be exciting. I'm going to try as much as possible to not go just at a speed, but just take pauses, allow us to do a lot of self-reflection, because this module is not about just the YDoS, but it's about self-introspection, human capital development, how you develop yourself to then think about developing other people. All right, so let's begin. When we hear the word self-leadership, made up of 2 words, self and leadership, what resonates with you? What comes to mind when you hear the word self-leadership? You can put it in the chat box. Yes, yes. Yes, the session is being recorded, just so we are aware. All right, so we can put it on YouTube later. When you hear the word self-leadership, you can put it in the chat box. You can, I'm sure we have an opportunity to unmute, correct? We can engage, or you can just put up your hand and then I'll call, so we can have it as orderly as possible. Self-leadership, what does it mean to you when you hear the word self-leadership? Thank you, Title. So I see Caroline, if you unmute and speak up. Caroline, you have the floor. If you can hear me, Caroline, your hand is raised, but okay, perfect. Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be in this class this morning. So for me, self-leadership is being able to understand oneself, leading oneself in the area of being aware of your strength, your emotions, your ability, your capacity. That's what self-leadership means to me.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. That was really good, Caroline. Thank you. I'll take 1 or 2 more within the chat box. So I see Abdullah Sahid says that, oh, the chat box is buzzing. The ability to lead yourself first before leading others. Excellent. Self-leadership is discipline and honesty. I see practice of intentionally influencing your own thinking and behavior. Ability, Ichichiku says, ability to understand, influence, and develop oneself. With all of the responses I'm getting so far, we might as well just close out of the class today and have the day off, right? It shows that we have a sense of what we're talking about. But my next question would then be, when we talk about self-leadership, it starts first with self. Do you, as a person, think that you lead yourself right, or you lead yourself well? So that's a self-reflecting question. Do you personally think that you lead yourself well, or you lead yourself right? You probably do not need to answer, but that's something for us to reflect on. Do you think that you lead yourself well and you lead yourself right? Right? So while we're reflecting on that, Geoff Goins, one of the advocates for self-leadership, says that the world's best leaders are people who lead others because they first lead themselves. The people who we say in the world, we can mention a few names of leaders across industries, across sectors, across geographical boundaries and barriers. There are names that we can mention that says these persons are actually excellent leaders. what Jeff Goins says is that these leaders that we all know are people who are able to lead others, but because they're able to lead themselves first. But they do not lead through position, they lead through examples. So when you think about yourself in the frame of self-leadership, are you leading by example or you're leading from position? And what does it mean to lead by example? So we're going to do a lot of self introspecting questions, and that helps us to truly understand and own the session. So this is exactly what the background of self-leadership is: leading by example or leading through example. So self-leadership is having a developed sense of who you are, what you can do, and where you're going. Who am I? What can I do? Where am I going? I think a mentor of mine once asked me this question. The question he asked me was, who are you? Who are you? So I'd like for us to answer that question. If you can put up your hand, maybe 1-2 persons, you can put it in the chat box. When you think about the question, who are you? What does it mean? What does that question mean to you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? We'll take a pause and just reflect. Who are you? Who am I? And you can share your experience in the chat box, or you can put up your hand and I'll take 1 or 2 persons. It'd be great to take a mail this time. If a mail can come off mute and share, that would be great. Okay, Aliyu. I'm Aliyu Rama. I'm a teacher, a writer, an advocate for empowering the next generation. Amazing. Thank you, Aliyu. At least we have a sense of who Aliyu is by what he does or what he can do, right? And also a sense of where he's going. I think where Aliyu is going is the journey of empowering the next generation. Okay. An Ichebe Favor says, well, I'm an Ichebe Favor, a goal-oriented person, a person who advocates for women and children, and I'm also a lawyer. Great. Awesome. So with that at the back of our mind, thank you so much, Aliyu and Victoria Favor, for sharing. With that concept of what self-leadership is, a sense of who we are, what we can do, and where we're going, we're able to then influence the perceptions of people through communication, through the emotions that we show and the behavior that we put out. People get to talk about who we are, right, going, and by a sense of who we are. So leadership is all about influence. So when we say self-leadership, we're talking about influencing self. We cannot think about influencing other people without having a sense of who we are as well. Now, self-leadership is also the ability to influence yourself in terms of your thinking, your feelings, which then produces actions. So which means that a sense, what people, the perception that people have of us is a perception of our thinking, the perception, and the focus of this module is to influence our thinkings, our feelings, and our actions. All right. Let's quickly breeze through. So these are the different components that typically defines leadership about self. The first will be self-awareness, acceptance, development, and then deployment. Awareness, acceptance, development, and deployment. So 2A's, 2D's, or we say A squared, D squared, right? All right, I think my internet went off for a minute. Great. Perfect. All right, so I think I'm back now. So when we hear the word self-awareness, what comes to mind? Self-awareness. Self-awareness. When you hear the word self-awareness, what comes to mind? Knowing who you really are. Knowing who you are. Okay. 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 Being true to yourself. Being aware. Thank you so much. You don't guess. I hope I did more than that. You don't guess it. All right. He says to be aware of your environment, to be aware of your emotions, and the rest. Self-worth. Awesome. So self-awareness is, what does awareness mean? Awareness is a consciousness of your feelings, your thinking, and your actions, right? So that awareness of all of the things that deal with you is what we mean by self-awareness. So when someone asks you the question, not only in interview scenarios, tell me about yourself. When you then begin to talk about the food you eat, the work you do, and all of that, you're talking about all of the things that define you as a person. So tell me about yourself is just an introduction to a sense of who you are. So the question now is, as a person who gets or who is into social impact or social development, when people ask you, tell me about yourself, they're only not talking about you as a person, they're talking about the work that you do. They're also talking about what makes up the passion for which you do the work that you do. They're talking about what informed your decision to go into a social impact. They're talking about what is important in your life, what is important in your journey as a leader, what's important in the work that you currently do. And they want to hear you speak about it and also reflect it in the life that you live. What we most times find out is that people talk about the work that they do, talk about their careers, but do not talk about how those things impact on them as individuals personally. There is no dichotomy, there's no separation between who you are as a person and then the work that you do. There has to be a consonance, there has to be an agreement. Because in the work that you do, you put yourself in terms of your thinking, in terms of your feelings, and then the actions that you portray. So there has to be staying true to yourself consistently, on and off the pitch, on and off the pitch. So that's exactly what we're talking about. When we talk about self-leadership, or self-leadership and self-awareness as a component of self-leadership, we are talking about the ability to accurately assess yourself in terms of your strengths, your weaknesses, what are your belief systems, the preferences that you have, and the personality. Now, this looks like all these words look like what we already are used to. But I can tell you for a fact that if we do an assessment now, just a very quick assessment, you can take out a sheet of paper and write out the strengths that you think you have, write out the weaknesses that you have, what drives you, what's the foundational belief system that you have, what preferences do you have, and what makes up your personality or your choices. You'll find out that a lot of us might struggle, but there's a need for us to do this. It's not something that you do now and then you don't do for another 3 years. You do it, if possible, as quarterly as possible, if possible, every month, because you find out that the environment where you stay also influences your personality or your awareness of yourself. Someone once says that environment impacts behavior, and that's completely true. And your behavior is just at the highest level of your thinking, highest level of your feelings. So there's a need to, one, accurately assess what of all of these components are, and then beyond assessing it, you also determine the impact of all of these things that you've assessed on your behavior, because the behavior is then the outward appearance of your strengths, your weaknesses, your drives, your beliefs, and your personality. Very, very important. So two things I've said so far is, firstly, there has to be an assessment of self. Then beyond the assessment of self, so how do I assess self? I do all of those assessments by looking at the inward, it's like an inward analysis. For those of us who are very conversant with data analysis, you have some background in data analysis, you find out that in analyzing, you put out all of the data, you break down the data, you, as much as possible, see how to categorize the data if possible. Now, you do the same thing with yourself. You look at your strengths, what's the data for that? You look at your weaknesses, what's the data for that? Do the same thing for your personality, your traits, and all of that. And then you then categorize them. Now I see that I struggle in this area. Oh, I see that I have a lot of bandwidth and strength in this area. People also say that I do have strength in this area. And then with that analysis and that breakdown, you then begin to look at how that impacts on your decision making, how it also impacts on the work that you do. It's okay for you to say that you got into the social impact space because that was like the lowest hanging fruit for you. It's also okay to say that I want to go into social impact because there's a lot of money from funders. That's absolutely fine, right? Some person got into the space because they want to give back. For some others, they got into the space because they want to get from it. That analysis is important because it also influences how you then go about driving social impact. Because what we found that over time, and data show, is that a lot of young people get into the space not only because of what they want to give, but also what they want to get. And that is absolutely fine. But what you now see is that when you get to that point where they're not getting as much as they want to get, it then becomes a struggle. So we see a lot of small scale social impact organizations completely just go off the grid after the first layer or first level of impact funding that they have. They use that to two persons get, say, $5,000 in grant funding or seed funding, for example. One person decides to make their office space look great, pimp it, polish it, looks nice. When anybody comes in there, they understand that these people they have taste. Another person takes that same money and then puts a lot of it into programmatic work. But the office where they work is just basic. Some persons even work from home. Now, these are two different individuals getting the same level of funding, but because of how they understand and assess themselves, they have different ways that they then take decisions. That's how environment impacts behavior. And that's why that analysis is very important. Many funders do not want to put funds where they do not go into programmatic work. I'm not saying that it is wrong to actually put your office in the right space or ensure that the workspace where you are working from is excellent. But there's also the need to understand, why am I making a decision to put the money more in programs than to putting the office in the right space? Just as an example, right? So that gives us a sense of how environment impacts behavior. Now, in terms of discovering our uniqueness or just analyzing ourselves more, we're going to look at like 8 different areas, not necessarily look at them, but I just speak to them. We're looking at values and aspirations personally. What are your passions and interests? So this is where you do the assessment. That assessment that we'll talk about that impacts your decision making or impacts your behavior, right? Values and aspiration personally, your passions and interests. Oh, definitely your habits. Talk about your weaknesses. We're also looking at your strengths, level of intelligence, personality, and of course our biases. Now, someone will be asking, why are we talking about our biases? Why are we talking about our weaknesses? Because these do not look like things we want to be honest with ourselves, we want to talk about. But if we don't talk about it, where it becomes a struggle is that when we are faced with times of dilemma, in social impact, some of them are called dilemma, where you have to decide to say, am I going to do the right thing? Or am I just going to turn a blind eye and act like it doesn't matter? That's when you then realize that that weakness and that bias that you didn't take note of from the beginning begins to come and become a challenge or a stumbling block. Check. Just to be sure that we're following, we can just put our favorite emoji in the chat box, just to be sure. Just want to be sure that we're following. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Your favorite emoji, a reaction. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Great. Great. All right. So let's continue. I see that we're here. Another component of discovering our uniqueness is our talents and skills. Every single person in the social impact space comes with a certain skill, comes with a certain gift. But there's a question. What separates talent from skills? What separates talent from skills? Or what's the distinguishing factor between talent and skills? We can put it in the chat box. Or are they the same thing? It's possible that they're the same thing. I'm just deceiving myself. It's possible that they're the same thing. If you think they are, you can share. If you think that they're different, you can absolutely share. Anyone? Any takers? Okay. Pressure says talents are naturally endowed while skills are acquired. Thank you. Talent is inborn. You learn skills. Great, great, great. Oh, I think we have a sense of what it is. So let's move on. All right. So you're absolutely correct. Right? Talents are special giftings that people have in certain areas of work on their or endeavor, right? While skills, we already know you have to learn them. But there's always this debate between, do you need more of talent or you need more of skill? We already know what the answer is. I can almost assume, right? But there's a book I read by John Maxwell some years back that says talent is not enough or talent is never enough. And it put a lot of question at the back of my mind. Why do we say, why did he mention that talent is never enough? Or why are we even talking about talent being not enough in self-awareness or being self-aware or being a self-starter or a self-leader? The reason why talent is not enough is because in most cases, people with talent do not realize that a talent can diminish or a talent can be obscure or a talent can probably never be seen because it is not developed. That a person who decides to develop themselves and become skillful at something can become better as someone who is very talented or who naturally was gifted in that particular regard. Now, some persons have excellent handwriting, right? While some other persons are gifted in the way they speak, Some persons have the voice of better than nightingales, if you put it that way, right? While some other persons have to then go through music school to develop themselves. Some persons even go to do this debate between let me not cause fire, but I'll say it, Ronaldo and Messi. Some persons will say one of them is more talented and the other person is gifted. I'm not going to say which is which. I'm going to leave you with that understanding. But if I bring that same analogy to self-leadership, what we're trying to say is whether or not you've got talent or a gift, you cannot take away the place of developing skill. And that is what helps you to even understand that you have a talent and you have to develop a skill is the need for self-assessment, for self-awareness. Self-awareness. And then when we talk about the world of work or the world of social impact being as dynamic, the world is so fluid. What you thought you knew today can become so obsolete in another 2 hours. If we live in the knowledge age that you have to develop yourself so quickly, else technology becomes what does the work and people become redundant in the workplace. So the place of developing skill can never be overemphasized, whether or not you have a talent or a gift in that regard. Let's take musicians, for example. We can almost tell you that Michael Jackson had a lot of talent. We can talk about people who have the gift for singing. But if you think about the number of times that they spend in the studio or spend developing those skills, you cannot compare them to people who have even better talent than they are, but would not realize how talented they are because maybe for away from exposure would also be developing that skill. So the point now is this: whether or not you've got talent or whether or not you're developing that skill, talent, which is natural, and skill, which is developed, both of them have to go together. You need to develop that skill or that talent area or develop that gift area, more or less. Now, your skills, your strengths, your weaknesses, all of these form your personality. Personality is just person with a bit of uh, ability. So your personal ability, that's personality. So your personality talks about what you can do as a person or who you are as a person. But here are some facts that we need to understand with understanding your personality. First of all, personalities are not cast in stone, they're not fixed. People change. Is why we talk about um, environment impacting behavior. Personalities are not fixed. And by way of personality, we're talking about strengths and weaknesses. We're talking about your feelings and your emotions. And all of this involves the decisions or impacts on decisions that you make. Another fact is that we need to identify what specific personality type we exude or we show and not excuse as bad character. I'll give an example. We've heard of people who tell you, that's how I am. That's me, take it or leave it. We've heard this statement a couple of times. We hear someone get into a place and then they're talking in a loud tone. I'll give you an example. Have you ever sat in a public space and someone is playing music from their phone or their device at a very high pitch? And then that sound is disturbing the workstation. And then you look back expecting that this person has some level of self-awareness or decorum. The person keeps playing the song, and then you make a motion to tell the person, please, can you turn it down a bit? And the person tells you, please leave me. Everybody's here to share the space. That's and then you walk up to the person and say, please, can you turn it down? The person tells you, please leave me. That's how I am. That's how I talk. That's how I look. Personalities are not fixed. People can actually change and actually change for the better. But it comes from a place of constant self-awareness, understanding that your personality or your person and the ability for your person to change is very important. We can actually change, we can actually improve, we can actually modify our person. That's a clear fact. That's something that we can actually do. So understanding your person, which is a function of your skills, your abilities, your strengths, your weaknesses, is important to then define your character, your decisions, and your behavior. I'll say that again. Understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, your values, your biases also is important for developing your character, your behavior, which impacts on the decisions that you make, even as a person, not just as a project coordinator or a project lead. All right. So in talking about personalities, a lot of psychologists, sociologists have talked about personality types. We're familiar with the quadrants. We heard of the sanguine, melancholic, choleric, phlegmatic. These are different variations of personality types. Now, I'm going to put something in the chat box. I want to know if we've ever heard about it. It's called the HBDI quadrant. That's the Herman. Give me a minute. The Herman brain dominance instrument. Has anybody heard of that? The Herman brain dominance instrument. Sorry, dominance is dominance. Correct. The Herman brain dominance. Great. I think someone has heard of it. Yes. Excellent. Great, great, great. Now, I'm just going to give a bit of context to that and how that impacts on our personality. So the Herman brain dominance instrument was developed by a German by the name Herman that talked about how the different quadrants or the different sides of a person, whether they are dominant or they are recessive, has an impact on the behavior that they show or the personality that they become or what they see on the outside. Now they have 4 different quadrants, which is the blue, the red, the green, and the yellow. More often than not, Herman said that a person during times of balance, by balance, we mean time where a person is showing. So let me use an example, right? Where everything is normal, times of normalcy, for example, you are more likely to show a particular kind of trait, right? For example, it can be, let me use myself as an example. More often than not, when things are normal, I am very blue. What does blue mean? It means that I'm analytical, formal, precise, I'm cautious, analytical, deliberate. I question things. I don't just swallow everything hook, line, and sinker. Right? More often than not, that's how I am. I analyze things. I don't just go with my emotions. So blue talks about analysis. The red talks about emotions. The yellow deals a lot with imagination and enthusiasm and passion, while the green talks about form, talks a lot about form. Now, when things are normal, in the normal scheme of things, I am more analytical. But when I have to make a very difficult decision, when I'm under pressure and and it feels like the environment is putting me in a very difficult position, I'm more tempted to be emotional. So, for example, I'm working on a project, or I'm working with other individuals on a project, and I realized that when we're giving funding to deploy funding for a particular project, I try to make decisions with the team, analyzing each funding, analyzing the project, analyzing the people I work with, and the project is going great. The line, we just realized that there was a cut. Aids have been cut. We don't get the money we're supposed to get. We're stuck. What do I do? Because I realized that over time, I become a bit emotional. What I realized is that I go into my closet, cry, talk to a few persons, share, meet a therapist. What happens now is I get into my zone. What is that zone? I become a bit emotional. Why or how did I get to that point? I got to that point because I have done an analysis of who I am. That when things are normal, I am very analytical. But when push comes to shove, I become very emotional. I'm going to give us a minute to think about it. So, which do you think you are more often than not? It's not like we show all four, but the difference is we show a lot more than the other. One is dominant and the other is recessive, but we show one more than the other, and another one is less. But when things become difficult, we then show the other side of it. So which are you? I give us a moment to think about it. Just a moment. All right. So what are we? Isn't it say she's melancholic? But I'm talking about the Herman brain. So what I'm going to ask now is when everything is normal, which are you? Are you blue? Um, are you red? So blue is analytical. So let's go with the word analytical. Are you analytical, emotional, imaginative for yellow? And then form for green. Form is like layers. You do one thing before the next, before the other one. That's form. So when things are normal, where do you think you are? Okay, isn't it says green? So you do form. Great. Juliet says she's blue. So I see a lot of analytical people. Okay. I see a lot of analytical people. Uh, we can share with them right afterwards. Okay, I see a lot of analysis. Some persons, okay, I see one person, Amoswara says she's more emotional when things are normal. When things are normal. So, but when things become difficult, when it becomes really difficult, which do you switch to? Which becomes the dominant, right? So what it means is that when things are normal, we show a dominant trait. That dominant trait can either be analytical, but when things become difficult, you then switch to another trait. That trait becomes the dominant one, while the other one becomes the recessive one. Hope says blue or normal when things are normal. I'm curious to see Hope when things are not, when push comes to shove, what happens? Okay, Abdulganiyu says when things are in order, she's calm, focused, impactful. That looks more like analytical. And red when things are difficult. I see that a lot of persons become emotional when things are difficult. Okay, Yvonne says green when things are normal, a lot of form. Then when things become difficult, we switch to our emotional side. I once had a friend who is very emotional, but when things become difficult, she becomes very analytical. So it's like this: when salary comes in, she takes her friends out. She's really cool. That's when you can ask her things. But when it's like mid month, third week, getting to the fourth week, when it looks like her account balance is looking very red, she analyzes every spend before she even buys data. It becomes difficult. So you see that a person can be very emotional when things are good, they become very analytical when when push comes to shove. All right. Okay, so that's a way for us to really analyze ourselves. So what I'm going to do is at the end of this class, I'm going to share with us the link where we can actually take this assessment. It's called the Herman Brain Dominance Instrument, and it's a very, very, very interesting way of analyzing our personality traits. Away from there are lots of them. There's one they call the DISC personality profile. There's the Johari window as well. Really interesting ways that we can analyze ourselves. And why this is important is Aristotle was the one who said, "Man, know thyself." With a knowledge of self, you're better able to do the other part. You're better able to accept, you're better able to develop, and you're better able to deploy. And that's why we're spending a lot of time talking about self-awareness. A lot of persons who get into social impact and are doing development work do not understand why in the first place they got into that space. So that when things become difficult, they either throw in the towel, rather than do a self-analysis, they just throw in the towel and give up. All right? And then the most important part of it all is what we're now going to talk about: self-acceptance. Whatever result you see is neither bad nor good. It is only a reflection of your traits. So what is more important is when you see the results or whatever outcome it is how do I develop in this particular area? When I say that I get emotional when things become difficult, it doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. It means that I just need a place to be able to figure things out in my emotional zone. Then I go back to the drawing board, analyze better, put things in form, and get my imaginative kick on, and then things begin to work. So when we do the assessment, understand what the result says, accept it, then develop in that particular area of struggle, and then it becomes better. And that's exactly how it works. I would absolutely share the link and see how we can take that test and then assess ourselves. So let's quickly move on. If you're still with me, just type check in the chat box, and then we can quickly move on. Check. Thank you very much. Check. Great. All right. No, please don't check out. Somebody said check out. Don't check out yet. We're still just we're still moving. All right. So intelligence is another part of self-awareness, and I'm always curious to see what differentiates intelligence from brilliance. Intelligence, brilliance, what's the difference? Anyways, not so much. Some persons have even found a way to diversify or divide intelligence into many parts. So there's financial intelligence, emotional intelligence, physical intelligence, which other form of intelligence? Spiritual intelligence, for those of us who are Christians or of faith, rather, right? All the forms of intelligence, right? There are very many forms of intelligence. But intelligence has to do with some innate ability or capacity to do something well, your understanding of that thing, your knowledge of it, and being able to apply that knowledge. That's basically what intelligence is. And that's a component of ourselves. So some of us are better intelligent in one area than we are in other areas. So an assessment of what area of intelligence or capacity you are in helps you to understand how to develop the other areas so that we're able to create some level of balance. The truth is that we cannot fully be great at everything, but we can be great at one thing, a few things, and then develop our capacity in other things. So that's how important it is in the area of self-leadership and intelligence. All right. Passions and interests. Now, this is pretty simple. Passion talks about what drives you. What is that thing that when you go to sleep at night, it wakes you up or gets you up, right? There was a story of a woman who was about 80 years old, going to in the mid-80s, going to 90, and they asked her, "Why do you get up every other morning?" She says, aside from God giving her life, there's something that she wants to achieve the following day. So every day I wake up is one reason why I need to do something. So your passions, your interest is another way of understanding or assessing yourself. What makes you angry? What makes you sad? What makes you excited? What gets your blood up? What gets your emotions all in check or not in check? What is meaningful work to you? What do we define as meaningful, right? What is your interest? What piques you? What excites you, right? How important is that work that you're engaging, right? Why did you get into this space in the first place? What change do you want to see in the world? The church I currently attend, I'm going to speak about this because it reflects on the work that I do. They always ask a question at the end of service, and this is the question they ask. Every single problem you see when you walk in the door and come to church on Sunday, is something that you can fix. So our pastor would, or our pastor would say, we call it class captain. He would say, if you think that you saw someone in church today and the person didn't come the following Sunday and it bothers you, it means that you need to be in the follow-up department. It means that that is something that is important to you. That's a way to define your area of interest. So when you see a problem in society, when you see a problem in the world that you want to fix, and that thing, you can't shake it off, it means that there is something that you can actually give or support, because you might not always need to start it. There might be other persons who have started it, but you can join them and then do work. So I currently work at Leap Africa, but I also support other projects that I'm not even a member of the staff, because I also have a passion or an interest in that particular field. So you need to also understand what is that level of interest that provides meaningful work to you. Okay, that talks about passions and interests. Weakness, one thing that we most times do not like to talk about. Now, when we go in for interviews, those of us who have attended interviews before, and they ask you, what is your weakness? Some person, I've heard a lot of people, I've sat in a few interviews, and the people will tell you, I don't have a weakness. And that is one area that you know that this person would, you will not you probably not get called for the job, because every single human being has a weakness. I have a weakness, even on this call, and I'm honest enough to accept it. I'm honest enough to understand it, because knowing that you realize that there's something that you struggle with, and with every struggle is an opportunity to develop. It's an opportunity to develop. So when we talk about weakness does not mean that you are weak. It means that you have an area of struggle, which, if developed, can become an area of strength. So what we do with weakness is that we understand it, we accept it, and then we begin to work towards addressing it. Understand that no one is perfect. Understand that everyone has a blind spot. What we do is identify, accept and recognize it, and then begin to take steps to work on it. And then always realize that in that area of weakness, another person has developed the strength in that particular regard. So when we understand how a person has developed in that areas, those areas rather, we're able to also learn from that and develop ourselves. So please, by all means, own that weakness, understand it, but most importantly, develop it. Develop to become a strength. And then we talk about biases. I dare say that every single person, every child born is a blank slate, understands that life is pure. My friend will always say to me, to the pure, all things are pure. But the moment we're born into a society, that environment impacts on that blank slate in the mind of a child, that subconsciously, unconsciously, biases are formed. Whether we like it or not, we live in a society that biases are formed. And the family, which is the first point of contact of development for a child or a person, forms a certain bias, because that family is also developed in a bias within that society. So what I'm trying to say in essence is every single person has some form of bias or another. The only difference is that some of us have come to a consciousness of what that bias is. And then beyond that consciousness is an acceptance of what that bias is. I give you an example. I grew up in a family where I understood that the man is supposed to, my dad wasn't one to show emotions. So there are times where I will catch my dad, we do something funny in the house and everybody's laughing. And I see my dad smile and I look at him. And the moment you look at him, he catches himself and he stays emotionless. For years, I came to understand that is it that people do not show emotions, or men do not show emotions? But one day, for some weird reason, I was walking and then I see an elderly woman on the street, and the rain was falling, and everybody was walking past this woman. Nobody cared to pick her up or move her away on the side. And I stood, and before long, I was crying. And I'm like, something is wrong. Chikameka, why are you crying? This woman is not related to you in any way. And why I was feeling that way was because I did not realize that men can actually show emotion. A bias is a subconsciously or unconscious understanding or judgment that we have formed by way of our influence or interaction with information or society. Some of us have a bias that money is supposed to be spent in a certain way. Some of us understand that if money is meant to be spent. Other persons have a bias that money is meant to be invested. Other persons have a bias that blacks, I've met people who will tell you that black people are subhuman to white people. That no matter what you do, you can never outdo a white person. And I'll be honest with you, I was one person who had that bias going on. When I got into a place where there were white people, I always felt inferior. And that's because the people that I grew up with had that bias naturally. When I was young, my dad used to have a Lebanese friend. And anytime the man was around, the people around him used to give him this reverence, like he was some superhuman personality. Until when I had the opportunity to then interact with other people from other cultures, whether they were white or other tribes, I then realized that at the first level, we are all humans. We are first of all human. And then began to unlearn some of these biases. Understand that first you would treat this person as human. And then these people who we think are superhuman, and when we are subhuman, also make the same level of mistakes that we make. That changed everything for me. And then it began to change the way I began to understand. Now the question is, what biases do I have, and how to understand what those conscious? Some of them are conscious. A conscious bias is one that you know that you already know that with fact, with truth, it is not the truth, but you've chosen not to accept it. Why an unconscious bias is one that is a belief that we hold, whether it is true or not, but we do not realize that we actually hold those beliefs. So whether we have unconscious bias or a conscious bias, what we need to do is, the moment we realize that there's a bias has been formed, we address that bias by asking questions, by making research. And then when we come to a truth, we accept it and implement. And realize that what might be true to you today can become a bias years later. You have to also unlearn that truth and accept what the actual new reality is. I like to say, great ideas loosely held. Great ideas loosely held. So a great way not to hold biases is that whatever information or truth or fact that I have now, I'm going to hold it until I have a better information that changes the dynamics for me. I'm holding this great idea. The moment I have a super idea that I know is true, I have to let it go and accept the new one. And the same thing holds sway when we are in social development. We used to think that the only way to run projects as development practitioner is when we get funding. But we're realizing very quickly now that even in international space, there is funding, but not so many persons want to push funding in a certain direction. So how would you then let go of that bias and nobody wants to give me money? Nobody is giving me money. To then think about a newer truth, which is, how do I make this project sustainable enough that it can fund itself and not feel bad that nobody is funding that project? So that when we get to that place where the higher truth is that we can fund the project can run by itself, we're in a place where we're happy, so that when funding comes, great. If funding doesn't come, the project can by itself run itself. So we unlearn those bias, we relearn a new truth, and we keep learning what helps the bias, or what helps that information, that truth become important or become very relevant. I hope I'm not moving too fast. Please let me know if I'm moving too fast, right? So these are some ways that we can discover our awareness, be very mindful. Being mindful is being very present, identifying, labeling, accepting those emotions and those triggers, being very open-minded. There's what we call growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Nothing very new, but growth mindset is a mindset that is open to new realities, open to accepting those new realities, and then working with those new realities. And also understanding that being self-aware is understanding that we all need help. No man is an island. And then collaborative work is what helps us to develop and become better. Constant self-reflection, assessment of our past and present experiences helps us to become better self-aware. Another thing we can also do to improve our self-awareness is to seek trusted feedback and to constantly journal. So we're going to get this slide, hopefully. So I'm going to just walk through a few more things so we can get into acceptance. Acceptance is not so very long as much as self-awareness, right? Because when we fully understand self by awareness, it becomes easier to accept and then develop, right? So we're going to quickly go into self-acceptance. I like this quote by Veronica Tugalev that says that your skin is your skin, your legs are your legs, your hair is your hair, your smile is your smile, your height is your height. I like to add that because some of us do not like the fact that we're very brief or we're very tall. Your past is your past. You can waste your time hating these things, but you may as well learn to accept them. Why? Because hating them or liking them, either of them is difficult and full of pain. But with acceptance, you'll be happy one day. With hatred, you definitely never will be happy. I really, really love this quote because it speaks a lot to me. Acceptance, acceptance is very, very important. Beyond just understanding and being aware of yourself, do you accept the results that you see? Do you accept the results that you see? Do you accept the results that you see? So the big question is, how do I then accept? To accept is to first of all realize that you're keeping an open mind. This is what I see about myself. It is not the final definition of me, it is the work in progress of me. An open mindset is the best way to accept self. And then do self-reflection, journaling. Journaling is, as much as possible, write out what you see about yourself. It is you. It is you. And that life, the life is you. This person is you. And you have an opportunity to change the dynamics of what you do not like about what you see about yourself. Some persons never have the opportunity to. Imagine life is so exciting that you can change something about you because you have an opportunity to do that. Wow, that is powerful. The fact that you have today to change the dynamics of what you see about yourself. Truly, truly powerful. Truly powerful. All right, and we move to the next one around self-development. It might look a bit very deep, but it is not so deep. Humans are made up of body, mind, soul, and spirits. Almost the same things that we already know. These are the different dimensions of self-development. Now, I'm going to ask a question. What has been, we've been on this, let's say we've been awake for about what? Roughly, for those of us who woke up at 5, you've been awake for about 6 hours. Let's say we've been awake for an average of 4 to 5 hours now. If you think about yourself very deeply, what has been the most dominant emotion that you have shown since you woke up? Just take a minute. What has been the most dominant emotion that you have shown since you woke up? For 6 minutes. What has been the most dominant emotion that you've shown since you woke up? Okay, I see sadness. Ernest, I'm very curious to I'm very curious to find out what that is. And I'm glad that you're accepting it. That is powerful. Thank you, first of all, for accepting it. But I'm curious to know why. Right? Optimism. So I see optimism, I see calm, lonely. Wow. Anxiety. I have a test by noon. Okay, very relative. Thank you. Now, because of what we have shared, the next question is, now that you've realized what that emotion is, how are you handling it? Because that emotion is currently affecting you. How are you handling that emotion? How are you handling that emotion? For those of us who said numbness, tiredness, fear, anxiety, even paranoia, hope, whatever it is, worry. Someone says worry because of the network. How are you currently handling it? Oh, I'm so sorry, Ernest. Oh, I'm so sorry. Now I see why. Okay, somebody said sleeping. Boy, was say sleeping. How are you handling it? Ernest, how are you currently handling it? If you're currently handling it, I'm just curious. Someone says praying, letting go, okay, sleeping and binge eating. Wow, that means you even have money to buy food. That's a great one. It means that you even have money to buy food. For some of us who don't have money to buy food, what then do we do? Someone says reading a book, relaxing, Living in the moment, really exciting. Creating space for exercise, talking. Someone says seeking for encouragement, creating a safe space. Ooh, nice, nice. Okay, let's take Ambassador Alfred Benjamin. If you want to unmute, you can speak. Let's just hear you, and then we can quickly move ahead. Working and listening to music. Music, okay, okay. Trying to live my life one step at a time. Really, really exciting. Interacting with people. So for loneliness, you interact with people whom you can easily access at that point in time. Some persons say reading. Now, the reason why I've asked the question about understanding first your most dominant emotion since you woke up, and then understanding how you can actually fix. Someone says admiring their shoes. I like that one. I like that one. Is if you understand the emotions that are most dominant in your present self, and then you understand how you are addressing that emotion, you're better able to handle people who stay around you. Because a consciousness of your emotion per time helps you to stay conscious of the emotions of other people. It's why when people say give grace to other people, be kind to other people, you don't know what someone else is going through. This is where it comes from. A consciousness of, if I'm conscious about my emotion and I know that I feel angry in this moment, I will not want to talk to anybody in that moment because I know that I need to deal with this emotion to be able to interact with someone else. My being angry in this moment is not the best time for me to now want to go and have a conversation with my better half. It means that I will either transfer it and pass anger to someone who never was interested in the anger in the first place. Now, let's take that to the world of work or social impact. Understanding yourself will help you better develop that emotion, which influences your decision and influences your behavior, basically. So I hope that sort of helps us better understand it. All right. So that's where emotional intelligence comes in. So for the four components we talked about, the soul, the body, the mind, emotional intelligence is one perfect way that we can develop it. Remember, I talked about intelligence and the different forms of intelligence: financial intelligence, spiritual intelligence, physical intelligence. Emotional intelligence is one. And emotional intelligence is basically how smart am I about my emotions? How have I identified that emotion, been aware of it, so then be able to develop it so that it doesn't impact or affect other people negatively? So that's what emotional intelligence is. And there are 5 components of emotional intelligence, which we can find anywhere on the internet. It starts first with self-awareness, like we've talked about. Then when you understand self, you can then manage self, which is self-regulation. With managing self, you can then understand that you can motivate self. That's where the development comes in. And with motivating self, you can either develop social skill, which is interaction, or empathy, which is a higher form of sympathy. So first of all, understand self, manage and regulate self, then you develop or motivate self enough to have social interaction and empathy. So these are the components or the elements of emotional intelligence. The goal is we need to develop emotional intelligence from a level of low emotional intelligence to higher emotional. So it's a skill that can be developed, just like writing, just like riding a bike, just like building a house. All of these things are skills. So you can develop emotional intelligence from a lower level to a higher level. And the only way you can know that you're developing emotional intelligence is that things that would typically get you off, you are now better able to manage it, not stop it, not end it, but manage it. So the better form of emotional intelligence, or the way you can know that you're developing higher levels of emotional intelligence, is that both your emotions of excitement and your emotions of sadness are not managed enough not to disturb your flow or your behavior and then disturb that of other people. That's a sign of high emotional intelligence. And you also need to know when to ask for help. All right. These are ways that we can increase or improve our emotional intelligence: reflect, take responsibility, learn to receive and give feedback, practice empathy, challenge negative thoughts. They didn't say cancel negative thoughts or reject it. You challenge them. Challenging them means that you address it, you recognize that it's there, and you seek for help when you can. Look for coping mechanism, like someone who says they binge eat. The only difference is that you want to be conscious that you're not replacing a negative emotion with a negative emotion or with a negative. So binge eating, if you're someone who's on the journey of losing weight and someone makes you angry and you go to binge eat junk food, you're replacing that with something even more difficult. It means that you end up hitting the gym again and starting afresh. So you want to be conscious of what ways you're using to increase your emotional intelligence. I like the person who says that they look at their shoes. For some other persons, they just have a happy place. Some persons just go into their room, burn a very beautiful candle, the room smells nice. So you need to discover what that thing is that helps you cope, as long as it is good enough and healthy enough. Be mindful of your behavior, understand what your stressors and triggers are. That's something very, very important. Some persons do not know what triggers them or what are their stressors. For one thing I realized yesterday was that once it goes past 7 or 8, for the past it's called, so it's latency. Latency is you measure things over a period of time. For those of us who understand taking data, I realized that since Saturday, once it's past 7, I just sort of shut down. So what I do is I just take a power nap past 7 p.m. I just take a power nap, sleep, and then by 9:30, 10, I feel a bit better. Another thing I realized is that chocolates are another good way for me to get my mood up. Dark chocolate. So if you want to do something great for me, buy me dark chocolates. If I'm not feeling not so good, I can take my body burns a lot of calories very quickly, just so that you know. So I take a lot but if you're not like me, please stay away from chocolates. All right. Just as we close out, we can also develop ourselves, our emotional intelligence or ourselves through time management, right? There are many ways to do this. We know of the prioritization matrix, which is not important and urgent. I wish we had more time. Would have delved into this. But what you want to focus on is the quadrant that talks about the important things help you to do the urgent things. That's the best way I can describe this. If you focus on the very important things, you have more time to do the urgent things. All right. And that's the best way that we can manage time, because the mind works on clarity. So you plan, you prioritize, and help to purge out distractions. So this is a clear way to understand the difference between self-confidence, overconfidence, and arrogance. While self-confidence understands that you're aware of your strengths and weaknesses, you're open to growth and change. Overconfidence overestimates your ability to manage risk. Arrogance is there's no regard for even risk or weaknesses in the first place. So a person who is self-confident understands that they have weaknesses and are open to addressing them. A person who's overconfident understands that they have weaknesses, right, but feel like there's no need or did not come to the terms of addressing them. Arrogance does not even realize that there's a weakness or doesn't even accept the feedback at all. All right, the way to develop self-confidence is you prepare, develop a growth mindset by stretching yourself and exposing yourself to more challenges, and more challenges here would mean newer bandwidths for improving yourself, and surround yourself with people who develop you and are positive enough. Focus on your strengths while you develop on your weakness and accept feedback. And then you act confident. Act confidence is you portray confidence in your body language. There are many ways we can talk about this. The way you walk into a room, we talk about your brand, the way you smell, the way you look, the way the way you write as well. All of this talks about acting confident and not overconfident or arrogant. Very, very important. You can also develop the mind with lifelong personal learning. Never stop learning, never stop growing. Even in the age of technology, in the age of robots, people would also control robots. People would also deploy robots. That's how learning improves self. And in conclusion about self-development, you need to think about how and the what. What do we need to develop? Skills and talents, leadership skills. And how do we need to do that? With continuous learning, with mentorship and feedback, with practicing integrity and accountability, showing and developing a positive mindset, a lot of reflection, staying and working with the wise, because he that works with the wise is wise. Constantly improving yourself, setting goals, and also addressing those biases. One way we can end this session in closing is, if we learn all of these things and do not take action, it becomes difficult. The best way we can understand that we've actually learned so much about this is to take action. We need to take action. So the simple action we're going to take today is this. Of all the skills we've talked about here, all of the skills we talked about here, from communication to emotional intelligence, being self-aware, humility, courage, collaboration, creative thinking, whatever it is that you currently have realized. So when you do a self-analysis or a self-awareness test by taking that Herman Brain Dominance Instrument test, and you pick out one skill, either one area where you struggle or one area where you have a strength, and then you now develop you have to decide what and what way or how are you going to develop that particular skill. It can be in the area of emotional intelligence, can be in the area of communication. You just have to pick that one skill and develop that for the next 1 week or the next 2 weeks. Someone said that a skill that you need to develop, you have to do that for about 2 to 3 weeks, about 21 days to become at least not, if not a master, but you are capable of developing yourself in that regard. So you can pick one area, one skill that you're committed to develop, and then decide how you're going to do that. So you pick the skill, and then you decide how you're going to do it. Are you going to be using continuous learning? It means that you're going to develop yourself by learning about how you can develop your emotional intelligence for the next 21 days. If you're picking mentorship and feedback, it means that you have to speak to people who know you and those who have a sense of you, and then ask them to give you feedback. And whatever feedback you get from them, you commit yourself to saying, okay, I have assessed myself, I've asked for feedback, I will put what I have assessed of myself and what others have assessed of me together, pick the ones that are overlapping, and then develop myself on that regard for the next 21 days. If you want to pick accountability, you pick an accountability partner, pick the area you want to be accountable in or on, if possible, about, and then decide to get someone who would be accountability partner, or people who be accountability partner, and who you're accountable for that particular skill or for that particular area. If you want to decide to setting goals, you have to pick one goal, develop in that particular regard, and do the same thing. So you pick the what, which is the skill, and the how you're going to do it. All right. And then we get to the last part, which is self-deployment. So self-deployment is typically simple. If you've understood by self-analysis and you've developed and accepted what that is, and you've chosen to develop, you then act. So the next step is when you discover that, you then begin to take action. Take action. All right. And on that note, we've come to the end of the session today. I hope that with these few points of mine, I've been able to convince you and not confuse you as to the importance of self-leadership. And just in closing, you cannot lead others if you cannot lead yourself. So the first person you want to lead is about leading yourself. Leading yourself. So Joe Miracle asked the question about, what about focus? Focus is just a how to developing that skill. It's just one of the how to developing that skill. So my charge to you this morning is, what is that one thing that you would choose to change or improve about yourself that makes you a better version of yourself? Because we are the sum total of our feelings, our emotions, our thoughts, by the way we act and the way we show ourselves in the workplace. You're going to be people of change. If you want to impact people and be the change that you want to see in society, you have to think about yourself. What is that one thing that I do not want to see in society that I currently embody? If you're someone who, when you eat stuff, you throw the wraps on the street and you want to go into circular economy, then it shows that you want to be the first person that when you eat stuff, you don't throw the wrappers everywhere. You put them in your bag till you dispose them properly. That is one way that you can actually be the change that you want to see. Because if there are 500 of you who throw things out, imagine the number of social impact organizations would have just picking up stuff in society. So be the change you want to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chukwemeka. Can we appreciate our facilitator in the chat? Our facilitator. Can we keep it coming? Keep it coming, keep it coming. Thank you so much, everyone. I saw that the session was really, the chat was really interesting. So many takes, so many insights, and so many questions coming. All right, so before we go on break, because we're supposed to go on break now and to return at in 10-15 minutes, let's quickly take some questions. We have questions in the chat, and I'm just going to read it out to you, Chukwemeka, so that you can answer quickly in 1 minute. So the first question here that I'm going to read out is from Eva. Eva says, is there a possibility of getting burnt out from being emotionally intelligent, rather? And how do you avoid burnout when it comes to emotional intelligence?
All right.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Eva. And that's a very, that's a very smart question. The truth is that I get this question quite a lot because people will tell you, do I have to be the bigger person? Do I have to be the better person? I think that's what the question is asking. Being emotionally intelligent, this person is acting on. Yes, there's a truth of that's possible, but here's the higher intelligence only because of the other person decides not to be. For example, I use a new car, and this is a true story. It was the dealership. He got to a traffic stop, and while you know how if you ever lived in Lagos, you know that Lagos and the downfall drivers can be very, very they're a car that's not even gotten to the house. This and the man just comes out of the car, he scratched it. He was and what happened came down from his car, started talking the shit of the and it became a fight. The next thing that happened was that the man was out of his car, the downfall driver was in the car, so he was talking to the conductor. With the tussle that was happening, the traffic freed up in front. The downfall driver began sped off, and the man holding onto the shirt of the downfall of the conductor, dragging him and running after the downfall. What happened next, or the boss? What happened next was that um, the man's hands slipped off the conductor's shirt, fell on the floor. What, which is a very have done differently. Yes, it was painful. So there are many. So I'm not going to come and say this has a way of paying back that emotional intelligence. It always has a way of benefiting the other person. So what I would suggest is in that instance where it feels like it is difficult to be the bigger person, be the bigger person. It doesn't mean that every single time you would get it right. There are times where you would miss it or go the wrong way. What I would say is society. It doesn't mean that we're taking the lower route, we're taking the higher route, we're the bigger person. Right. Biases. You said so on the topic of biases, you stumbled upon a video where over 100 people were asked to talk about their racial, and he had no bias in the context. But with further probing, he actually had more inclination to a particular race. Now, with your reference to what I learned in this scenario, how do we deal with a bias to work for us? But it's contrary to what is accepted by society. Now, this is actually true. The truth is that there are certain biases that are prevalent in society, but society does not even has not come to the consciousness that that bias exists. What we can do is to much as possible, share information about that bias. But the difficult thing now is that you are now correcting a bias and being the bigger person. So it's like a double responsiveness of it. It might be slow. You need to change them within the set. I'm able to answer it. So what you can do is express that consciousness outside, but it becomes difficult, basically. And how do we see of how we should be? The truth is this: we're not true to their own uniqueness. A reflection of what is unique. If you want integrity to become the order of the day in society, you have to be a person of integrity enough that another person sees it to be a trait that's acceptable, and then they become a reflection of that as well. And that's how society, it might not be as fluid and as fast as we would expect it to be, but that's actually the best way that it can become. I hope that answers it.
Thank you so much, Femka, for answering those questions. I hope that the people that asked the questions, they were in class, they did not drop off, and they got the desired answer they were looking for. All right, so we've come to the end of the first session. We have another session for 11:40. And so that means we have just, according to what the time is now, we have like 3 minutes for break. But let's go on a 5 minutes break. Let's stretch our legs, get water, grab some snacks, and we'll come back after 5 minutes so that we can take the next session for today. The attendance link has been shared on the chat, so just scroll up a bit and you will find the attendance link for this session. I'm going to drop it again just one more time before we drop off the score. I'd advise that you just stay on the call and go do, stretch your legs, take a break, and then you return back so that you don't miss the second session. Please note that we are going on break for 5 minutes so that we can get started on the second session really quickly and we end today's class on time. We don't want to keep anyone waiting for hours. All right. So if you have filled the attendance for link before, you are good. You can go take your break. If you haven't, please fill it and make sure that your presence is registered here. I just put the link again. The link is working. It probably is your network. So just try and refresh your browser and try the link again. If you don't get to fill it now, you can fill it. You can fill it in the second session. I'm just told our facilitator is in the room. So just quickly take your break and be back here in 3 minutes. I've taken like 2 minutes out of the session. Thank you.